Hello and welcome to another Applied Radiology Expert Forum webinar. Today's program is entitled, How to Implement Artificial Intelligence in Imaging Workflows, a platform approach to seamless integration. Artificial intelligence has the potential to help manage the dramatic rise in volumes and complexity of exams when deployed into imaging workflows. But AI applications can't help if they are difficult to implement, maintain, and use. So what is the solution? Today you will hear about workflow orchestration that can help reduce the effort required on both the part of the individual user and that of their information technology support staff. So with that, let me introduce our panel today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sanjay Parekh, who is a senior market analyst at Signify Research. Signify is an independent supplier of market intelligence and consultancy services to the global healthcare technology industry. Dr. Parekh joined Signify Research in 2019 after 2 years of postdoctoral experience using big data in healthcare. At Signify Research, he works as part of the medical imaging team specializing in healthcare technology, medical imaging, and artificial intelligence. Dr. Parekh has published numerous articles providing market research and thought leadership related to the use of AI in radiology. Dr. Parekh, do we have you on the line?
Kieran, I'm here. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction and looking forward to this webinar.
Thank you again for joining us, sir. Joining Dr. Parekh, we have Mr. Rahul Menon, who is the Global Product Marketing Director at GE Healthcare. Rahul leads global marketing strategy and product development for GE Healthcare's mobile X-ray and artificial intelligence product portfolio. Rahul, do we have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thanks again for joining us. And finally, we have Mr. Peter Eggleston joining us, who is the Director of Global Product Marketing for GE Healthcare. Peter has over 25 years experience in bringing innovative and AI-based products to market. At GE Healthcare, he is responsible for marketing strategy and enablement of the company's radiology packs, visualization, and AI orchestration solutions. Peter, do we have you on the line as well?
You do, Kieran. Good day to everyone.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm Kieran Anderson, Group Publisher here at Applied Radiology, and I will be your host and moderator today. Today's program has been brought to you by GE Healthcare, and we thank them for their continued support.
In 1965, Gordon Moore saw a trend that the speed and capability of our computers were doubling every couple of years, while at the same time costing less. He introduced us to the concept of an exponential technology curve called Moore's Law, and this drove the exponential change in computing power for several decades. Driven by faster chips, these exponential technology innovation curves have made machines smart, fast, and affordable, leading to today's rise of machine learning. This has also influenced the way we perceived our technology future. 20 years ago, Ray Kurzweil explained, when people think of a future period, they intuitively assume that the current rate of progress will continue for future periods. In other words, it's human nature to adapt to the changing pace, so our intuition tells us that technology will continue to evolve at the present rate. Our tendency to predict the future based on a linear view of the past, and therein lays a trap for us in understanding and planning for the future, especially in regards to AI in radiology. And let me explain further. According to a recent report issued by Stanford University, computational power is accelerating at a much higher rate than the development of processor chips. As a result, we are seeing that the performance of AI algorithms are far outpacing Moore's Law. Prior to 2012, AI results closely track Moore's Law, with computing power doubling every 2 years. Post-2012, compute power has been doubling every 3.5 months. This impact on AI and machine learning is astounding. In a span of just 18 months, the time required to train an image recognition neural network fell from 3 hours to just 88 seconds, with no compromise in accuracy. Therefore, to really understand the future correctly, and to understand how quickly AI will benefit the field of radiology, one needs to imagine things moving at a much faster rate than they're moving now. You need to understand your viewpoint relative to the velocity of technology change. Let me give you an example. Here you're looking down a track. As you're traveling down a track, your rate of progress looks pretty constant, right? Well, but not so fast. If you take a step back and look at your travel in relation to the world around you, you see that the situation is actually quite dramatically different. And that is the perspective change that we need to appreciate to prepare ourselves and our radiologists for the near future, a future in which artificial intelligence becomes pervasive in our imaging workflows. Because what we perceived as a far future is not quite so distant. If you think about the rate of AI adoption in healthcare and your reference is the past, then you might think that you're rather like our clinician here, walking up a gentle slope of technology progress, when in fact, the future is coming much sooner than we realize because it's a more realistic viewpoint of where we are at now relative to the availability and utilization of AI in imaging. And let me show you why. AI is impacting radiology at a much more quicker pace than other fields. In this graph of published articles and papers on utilizing AI for diagnostics in radiology imaging, we can see this exponential trend very clearly. It shows the number of publications dramatically increased over the past 10 years, from 150 to 800 a year. And this is leading to an exponential growth in investment in medical imaging AI startups. In fact, investment in healthcare AI tops all other industries in AI deal activity. And this is resulting in a flood of AI-based imaging applications in the commercialization pipeline that will soon be coming onto the market. So this raises the question, how will you implement AI, all this AI, into your imaging workflows? And how will you do so in such a way that is quick, easy, and scalable? What's needed is a platform approach to the seamless integration, an end-to-end approach to incorporating artificial intelligence in imaging workflows from the point of scan to the radiologist diagnosis. And that's the topic of our webinar today. Thank you for spending the next hour with us to learn more about this. And I'd like to now hand you over to Sanjay Parekh, who will take a look at the market data and trends.
Thank you very much, Pete. That was a great introduction to set the scene for AI. As Peter said, AI is becoming more prevalent in radiology. And today, I would like to share with you an insight on the value of AI imaging and AI imaging platforms, and why these platforms are key to addressing the last mile challenges of deploying AI solutions. Before we dive in, I would like to set the scene and give a bit of background on AI-based clinical applications and the state of play of today's market. I'm going to go and dig in a bit more analytically and show you some data as well. And if we can start off with that. Looking at the top level trends for AI solutions in medical imaging, the use of AI in radiology has evolved. From basic computer-aided detection solutions to now solutions that are employing deep learning. The market, however, remains in its early stages of development. And although some technical barriers, for example, algorithm accuracy, have been addressed, time is still needed for market adoption. And customer confidence in these AI solutions is also needed. But referring back to what Pete introduced us to earlier, the market is evolving up at a rapid pace, and there are frequent product launches. If we look at the recent COVID-19 pandemic that has affected all of us today, this highlights a very important point. Many of these AI vendors have developed AI solutions to detect the effects of the virus, and that too in rapid time. Regulatory clearance in Europe and the US has also increased, but Asia does lag behind, and I will come onto that a bit later. However, there are some barriers to market adoption and wide-scale market adoption. These include the lack of clinical validation studies showing the generalizability and return on investment for AI solutions, and the lack of reimbursement for AI solutions. Who is going to pay for this AI? However, from our research, we forecast that the market is going to reach almost $2 billion over the next 5 years by 2024. And the forecast graph showing here echoes what Pete introduced us to earlier, is when you take a step back from where you are, there's going to be a fast rise in the growth of AI. So to date, AI solutions have targeted a number of use cases across multiple specialties and multiple modalities. As we can see on the left, pulmonology and neurology are two of the most commonly targeted segments. And typical use cases include lung nodules, tuberculosis, and stroke detection. Over on the right, we can see that CT, closely followed by MRI, are two of the most commonly used modalities targeted by AI vendors. As the market evolves, we will see an increase in AI solutions that target other areas, for example, the liver and prostate. As more regulatory approvals are awarded, and I touched on this earlier, the number of solutions that are commercially available will also rise. Leading the way is Europe and the US. Over the last 5 years, the US FDA have cleared 64 AI algorithms or solutions for commercial use. And in Europe, over the same time period, 61 AI solutions have been awarded a CE mark. However, as I've mentioned, the Asian markets do lag behind, and in particular, the major markets, namely China, Japan, and South Korea. Cumulatively, these markets have only approved 15 solutions, and that too in the last 3 years. As the market evolves, and this graph shows this, we can see a year-on-year decline in AI solutions in recent times. However, this is not because AI is becoming less popular, but the demand for the type of product is evolving, and this is moving from detection-only solutions to solutions which offer quantification and clinical decision support. But these have received fewer approvals to date. Now that I've set the scene, let's move our attention back to AI imaging platforms in radiology. What are they, what do they do, and what's the advantage of them? Implementing AI into the clinical workflow is being driven by a market push from large imaging informatics vendors, such as GE Healthcare. As they look to increase their market presence, imaging informatics vendors want to be seen as leading the way in this market. And the fact that they have a greater influence on the market compared to independent vendors helps them achieve this. The imaging informatics vendors have adopted two strategies to increase their influence on the market. The first is by adopting a build and partner strategy. This involves some in-house algorithm development, but also partnering with independent algorithm developers. For example, GE Healthcare has partnered with MaxQ AI to deploy its ICH, so intracranial hemorrhage, and stroke solution, both via the PACS as well as embedding it onto the CT scanners. And I think Rahul will talk about point-of-care AI later on. The second strategy of imaging informatics vendors have adopted is developing AI imaging platforms. Some vendors have launched the first generation of these platforms, and we expect more to follow. Vendors, however, have adopted different strategies. GE Healthcare's platform, the OpenAI Orchestrator, is a proprietary solution. However, it does allow third-party API plugins. Some third-party vendors have released vendor-agnostic platforms, whilst others have focused their efforts on custom integrations of AI. As the market matures, we will see these strategies evolve to meet market demands. One of the key issues addressed by AI imaging platforms is the last mile challenge, and that is to deploy the AI solutions into the clinical workflow and offer orchestration capabilities. As AI becomes more commonplace in radiology, platforms will be key to the seamless integration of AI in the workflow. AI imaging platforms may also be packaged together with AI marketplaces. And together, these address the challenges of adopting AI. This includes the selection and purchase of AI solutions, the deployment of these solutions into the imaging infrastructure, and the orchestration of the workflow. I believe it will be these AI imaging platforms that will enable radiology AI to truly scale. To drive home this point, I've developed this graphic, of course, in a simplified manner, to attempt to show the advantages of an AI imaging platform over individual AI installations. Over on the left, we can see that individual AI solutions require separate servers or nodes where the AI inferencing occurs, and this interacts with the image management platform before the results are displayed in the diagnostic viewer for the radiologist. However, on the right-hand side, using an AI imaging platform, it replaces the need for multiple AI servers or multiple AI nodes, and the results can be sent directly from the imaging platform to the diagnostic viewer for the radiologist to view and also interact with. And this gives the radiologist the ability to edit, accept, or reject the AI findings before they are committed to the PACS. This starts to highlight the value and the benefit of AI imaging platforms. So what are the benefits do AI imaging platforms offer? As I've mentioned, they remove the need for multiple AI servers or nodes. They are able to route scans to the appropriate AI algorithm and support AI inferencing. AI imaging platforms are also able to directly display the AI results in the viewer, providing the radiologist with the ability to interact with them, all from a single user interface, before these results can then be sent back to the PACS and integrated into the work list. The platform is also able to manage resource and ensure that critical studies are prioritized for analysis. It may also support users in developing and onboarding their own AI algorithms for use. As more imaging AI platforms come to market and become more integral to the imaging workflow, the number and the complexity of these functions that they are able to offer will no doubt increase. So just to round up, I will discuss some of the differentiators of the first generation of AI platforms and pose a set of questions for each of the factors. So if we start off with AI applications, will the platform or the marketplace host native algorithms as well as third-party algorithms? And will users have the tools to develop their own algorithms? In terms of deployment, will the platform be installed on-premise, or will it have cloud capabilities? Some vendors may even choose to adopt a hybrid approach. Customizable orchestration. Can the user set their own rules for routing the case? And does the platform have the ability to triage cases on the work list? How will the results be displayed? Will they be provided in a unified user interface? And will the radiologist be able to interact with the findings? In terms of support, what level will be provided by the vendor? And will this be hands-on support? Finally, business models is another way that some vendors have differentiated. And this is either through charging for both the platform and the algorithms, or providing the AI platform to customers for free and then charging for the AI algorithms only. These questions may also be considered by healthcare providers looking to implement AI platforms into their radiology workflow, and vendors looking to differentiate themselves from the competition. And that takes us to the end of this part of the talk. In summary, I've talked about the need for AI imaging platforms and how they are key to the seamless integration of AI in the workflow. As these AI solutions become more ubiquitous in radiology, it will be these AI imaging platforms that address the last mile challenges of deployment. and also truly enable radiology AI to scale.
Dr. Parekh, I'd like to thank you very much for the slides you've put together there. We're going to open up a poll here for the audience. I'd like to apologize, by the way, for losing my audio. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but earlier on we did lose some audio. So we have our first poll here today. What clinical applications do you wish to deploy AI algorithms in a chest X-ray? Number of choices to choose from here. I'd ask that you take a moment to participate in the poll, and then we'll move along. All right, I'm going to share the results now, and then we'll get to our next presentation. So it's pretty clear. We're with 100% of you looking at the pneumothorax area, and then there's a couple of other areas. So we can discuss these later in the event. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rahul, who will begin his talk now. Rahul, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. My name is Rahul. I take care of global marketing for mobile X-ray and AI across CE Healthcare. So I'm going to focus my talk about the demands of imaging at point of care. In the times that we live in, point of care imaging has been at the forefront. It's been at the center stage, and we will explore how AI can improve the life of the technologist, give more clinical confidence to the radiologist, and improve overall imaging workflow. So what do we mean by point of care? Point of care can be talked about when a medical device goes to the patient, when the patient might be at the most critical condition. For example, in a trauma room, a patient might be brought from a recent accident, and the trauma surgeon or the trauma physician would want to know what are the most critical conditions arising in the patient. For example, in a pneumothorax. When you look at surgery, surgeons want to monitor how the patients are responding to the surgery, and after the surgery is done, for example, are there any foreign artifacts within the body that they want to, of course, avoid. Speaking of ICUs, doctors want to monitor how the patient is responding post-surgery, for example, after trauma or after surgery that they had, and how long the patient has to remain in the ICU. So these are just three common examples of point of care. However, my focus here is on imaging. Various imaging modalities play a very important role in enabling clinical diagnosis and giving clinical confidence to radiologists today. The times that we live in, COVID-19, this need has been more pronounced. On the left, you see McCormick Convention Center in Chicago, the site of the annual RSNA conference, Radiological Society of North America, that many of you may be aware about. That entire convention site had been made a makeshift hospital recently. So screening facilities are moving beyond traditional hospitals. On the right, you see that many hospitals are also setting up makeshift tents beyond their hospitals, their buildings. So that's interesting observation of how the hospital systems are responding to the needs of COVID-19. Having understood this, let's look at a typical imaging workflow at the point of care. We could typically divide that into pre-exam or pre-scan, intra-exam, and post-exam. Now, this is a highly manual and complicated process. In pre-exam, you may have a technologist who drives the equipment, be it an ultrasound or a mobile X-ray, at the bedside next to the patient. Now, that patient may be unconscious, and he or she positions the patient, for example, placing a detector ready for the examination, selecting the right protocol. So all that is step one. Once the patient and protocol is correctly set up, the second step is about getting the right quality of images, meeting ALARA as low as reasonably achievable guidelines. In short, making the first image count before the image is exported to PACS. And finally, at the PACS workstation, most of the diagnosis happens. So this is a complex process, a complex interplay between a technologist, a patient, a medical device, software, network technology, so on and so forth. How can artificial intelligence improve this entire workflow? So AI has made great progression. We are observing AI is contributing in 3 pillars: efficiency, quality, and clinical decision support. Speaking of efficiency, AI is automating different workflow steps in order to make the entire process more seamless, more faster. For quality, AI is flagging errors at the point of care and letting technologists know if a repeat exam is needed before the image is exported to PACS. Dr. Parekh spoke earlier about clinical decision support, and many of you voted pneumothorax as the most important, but there is a plethora of AI applications coming in different care areas like lung nodule detection, tuberculosis, so on and so forth. And this is just going to be more advanced in the future. So having set this stage and having understood how artificial intelligence is poised to improve the imaging workflow, I would like to introduce the Critical Care Suite from GE Healthcare. Our Critical Care Suite is world's first on-device artificial intelligence algorithm that works at the point of care, but also exports AI alert at the PACS workstation. You can find out more about Critical Care Suite at gehealthcare.com/Critical Care Suite. We are FDA cleared here in the US, and we also have a CE mark in Europe. In fact, we are partnering with many hospitals and healthcare systems around the world who have just started to use the possibilities of AI in improving their workflow. Let me give you some examples about the features in Critical Care Suite and how they contribute to the 3 pillars I mentioned about efficiency, quality, and clinical decision support. Let's look at efficiency first. If you focus on the image on the left, in a complex workflow, remember my conversation about a detector being placed behind a patient. Now, the detector orientation may be such that the original acquired image may not be heads up. It might be oriented to the right or to the left. In a typical mid-sized to large hospital, a technologist might end up spending 3 to 4 clicks in order to make that image heads up before he or she closes the examination and exports to PAC. If you look at this from a yearly perspective, all the technologists could spend 70,000 clicks or 20 hours of work doing so. Now, we have observed that when AI is applied, all that 20 hours of work throughout the year is just reduced to 7 minutes of effort for the year. Now, that's tremendous boost for the technologist. And the feedback we're getting is that this is the most popular feature from the healthcare systems where AI is really improving the efficiency at the point of care. Let's look at the quality bucket. In a fast-paced environment where a lot of chest X-ray examinations may be carried out, think COVID-19 times, an acquired chest X-ray image might have a clipped lung, as you see here in the image on the left. The bottom right is clipped. How can AI be trained to identify such lung clippings and warn technology? This is what our Critical Care Suite offers, and we give the option to the technologist to reprocess the image or retake an image before she leaves the site or the patient leaves the hospital. So this is a very, very important feature before the image is exported to the PACS. Let's look at one more quality feature, protocol mismatch. On the left, you would notice that the technologist has selected an abdomen protocol, but if she ends up doing a chest X-ray protocol, so the AI algorithm is trained to alert at the point of care before the technologist leaves the site or the patient leaves the site, right? So we've seen 3 examples of how artificial intelligence is poised to help have efficiency and quality. Moving on. Speaking of clinical decision support, the first algorithm that we have launched is pneumothorax detection. On the left, you see a typical chest X-ray. Our AI algorithm is trained to run as soon as a chest X-ray is acquired and generate an alert at the point of care, which is eventually exported to the PACS for review by the radiologist. We also have different DICOM tags that the radiologist could use to prioritize the most critical cases at the top of the list. Now, if you look at the world today, there are not enough radiologists in different hospital systems around the world, right? Whereas the volume of examinations are tremendous. 60% of chest X-ray examinations could be marked as stat, as urgent. Where do you pay attention to with the limited resources you have? That's where the power of AI comes in, to separate the needle from the haystack, to focus on the most critical cases. And GE Healthcare is proud to have a pneumothorax algorithm that helps our radiologists do so. So let's take a step back. We saw the importance of imaging at point of care, especially in the times of COVID. And we just discussed one example of a mobile X-ray and how artificial intelligence is embedded at point of care. But many of you know that AI is also there in other modalities like a CT scanner, or it's also in other modalities like a mammography system or an MRI system, right? And all this is given by the Edison platform, which, by the way, is non-proprietary. It's an open source platform ready to partner with more apps providers around the world in the future. But that said, all this is going to generate a deluge of AI notifications. And on the earlier point mentioned by Pete, how do we make it easier, manageable for the radiology systems around the world to intelligently manage these AI notifications? So this is a great transition to the next topic with my colleague, Pete. Pete, over to you.
I'll jump in here first, Rahul, and first thank you for sharing those clinical benefits at the point of care and showing how AI can be used efficiently. Before I turn it over to Pete, we're going to do another poll here. I'll give you a little bit more time this time to respond. Encourage all of you to participate. Do you currently utilize artificial intelligence-based clinical applications in your radiology reading workflows? Do not count advanced visualization post-processing in that scenario. So yes, no, but considering adding it in the next 6 months are not applicable to my organization. So I'll give you all a moment to participate in that before we move on and share the results, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Eggleston, who has the final presentation for the day. All right, I think got about enough time there. We'll take a look at the results. And here you can see that 42% of you say no, you are not currently using AI-based clinical applications. Some of you are considering it, and a large percentage of you do not feel it's applicable to your organization. So interesting responses there. I'm going to now turn it over to Pete Eggleston, who is next up on our presentation list here. Mr. Eggleston, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kieran. I want to first start off by looking at the current reality for our health systems from a global perspective, not just the U.S. A growing workload, shortage of medical experts, and declining revenues often lead to potentially dangerous backlogs of unreported examinations, especially in funded healthcare systems in emerging markets. With the increased demand for radiological imaging, the continuous acceleration of image acquisition, and the expansion of teleradiology, radiologists now more than ever are working under the increased pressure of time. And this pressure can no longer be compensated by improving the risk PACS integration or use of speech recognition software. The impact, lab and radiology test turnaround times are delaying patient disposition and have been identified as the main cause of reduced ED throughput. And as we have become acutely aware of with the COVID-19 epidemic, overcrowding stresses the ability of our emergency departments and ICUs to provide immediate access and stabilization to those patients who have an emergent medical condition. All this is providing a tide of interest in incorporating AI into the reading workflow, for it's been shown to intelligently automate manual tasks, freeing time for the radiologist to support informed decision-making and personalized care, providing decision support to the radiologist, notifying them of emergent conditions, and providing intelligence to back that up. And this includes both the read criticality as well as information to support a more narrow and accurate differential diagnosis. And AI has also been shown that it can assist in detecting patterns in the imaging data that are too subtle or complex for humans to easily see. In other words, AI can assist radiologists with not only managing a growing volume and complexity of exams, but also ensuring they're always reading for the right patient at the right time to give us a finer separation between stat and critical. Let's review what we learned from Parag earlier in this presentation. The functions the AI-enabled platform needs to provide are routing of scans to the appropriate AI algorithm, controlling the AI inferencing, managing computational resources to ensure that the critical studies are analyzed in a time-appropriate manner, sending the results back to PACS for workless integration, displaying the results in a diagnostic viewer, enabling the radiologist to utilize the results or not, and most importantly, to keep up with a rapidly growing number of AI clinical applications being made available to us. It needs to support the rapid onboarding of algorithms from independent developers as well. And ask yourself the question, if an AI-based COVID detection algorithm were made available to you today, how would you implement this in your imaging workflows? And perhaps more importantly, how quickly could you implement it? The answer will most likely depend on whether or not your current PACS has a platform for rapid and easily onboarding of new clinical applications, and what changes is required to your current workflows to integrate those applications. This is why the Edison team at GE Healthcare has created the Open AI Orchestrator. It utilizes a unique visual orchestration engine that provides a flexible and unified solution to allow organizations to quickly deploy, automate, and manage non-AI as well as AI-based algorithms into their imaging workflows. It provides a visual method to instrument and optimize imaging workflows, rules to manage the use of the AI applications, and an ability to triage and prioritize exams to provide timely decision support. So let's see how it works. First, exams from the imaging scanners are sent into the PACS. The Edison AI Orchestrator, an optional component to the Centricity PACS, watches the exams coming into the PACS and runs rules on them based on DICOM header information, such as patient age, modality, body part, and even the imaging location that the patient might reside at, such as the ED. It executes one or more decision and routing workflow maps that are engaged with the visual editor, matching the relevant exams with the proper AI clinical apps and routing the exams to these applications wherever they reside, on-premise or in the cloud. In this case, if a chest x-ray arrives from the patient who's 18 years or older from the ED, it can be routed to the pneumothorax detection algorithm and given a high priority for processing. It then takes the AI results back from these algorithms and the probability scores and any location references such as heat map, image overlay, and passes these back into the PACS. From there, these results are made available to the radiologists at the right points in their workflow, both in their work list and in the diagnostic hub as well as in the viewer itself. What I'm showing you here is our Centricity Workflow Manager, an intelligent work list that's provided with our diagnostic radiology PACS viewer. The AI results are presented in the appropriate places in this workflow so they can be used to triage and prioritize the reading for an individual or for a group. Here, it's a little hard to see, but what I'm showing is that for any individual work list, we can see the total number of exams, the number of stat exams in red, and on the right, the number that have critical AI findings associated with them. Now, these results can also be used to sort the exam list, so the ones with critical findings are at the top. And any exam that has a critical finding is flagged, and actually hovering over that flag can very quickly display the results to the same holds for any exams that are priors with critical findings. Finally, in our diagnostic hub area, the reader can not only view the exam notes as well as any relevant EMR notes, but they can also see the summary report provided by the AI algorithms on the exam. So the most important things to know in this example are that we're not changing the radiologist reading workflow, we're enhancing it. And the AI orchestrated algorithms share a common user experience. There are no additional interfaces or workflows that the radiologist is required to learn or use. And most importantly, we have not added any additional clicks to the radiologist workflow. Next, when the radiologist opens a case to read, the AI results can automatically be incorporated into the hanging protocols. This allows the AI results to be shown along with the current study, deployed as a secondary DICOM capture or by using the DICOM structured report standard, otherwise known as CAD-SR. In this example, we're seeing the probability score of a pneumothorax finding along with a heat map overlay showing the area in the lung at which it was detected. Now, at this point, I want to point out that what I'm showing you in these last few slides, the manner in which the AI results are being incorporated into the work-listened viewer does not require our orchestrator. If the AI results are coming directly from a scanner or Edison Edge device, such as in the case of the GE Healthcare's AI-enabled CT, ultrasound, or X-ray scanners, such as Raul showed you. For instance, the user would have the same experience in reading an exam that was produced with our mobile X-ray running the critical care suite as it would if it was the critical care suite algorithm was orchestrated directly in the PACS. And then finally, since the Edison AI Orchestrator is an open system, users can configure the workflows to include code that can interact with other hospital systems, such as a paging or notification system. For example, a rule can be written so that if a probability of finding score exceeds some confidence threshold, a text or email could be automatically sent to some member of the care team to alert them. Now, one more note before I move on. For our webinar attendees that are not US-based, I want to point out that the worklist prioritization that you've seen is currently only available in the US. However, the AI results viewing capabilities are available to you in the viewer to provide diagnostic decision support during your read. Now, let's take a look inside the OpenAI Orchestrator. By way of a visual workflow editor, it explicitly documents the rules and routes for the exam data and AI processes, the required parameters of operation, and subsequent actions. It manages the inner operations along with the various imaging devices, data stores, and other information technology systems. Initially bringing this to market, this is only compatible with our GE PACS system. In the simple workflow graph, you can see the decision points, the processing elements, and other operations as color-coded shapes. And all this makes the AI processing explicit and understandable to clinicians, not just IT personnel. And most importantly, it provides your teams an easy way to instrument and improve your workflows. And through the administration interface, you can easily see all the AI processes and control their operation. You can even run multiple instances of the workflows and then compare the impact of various parameter settings, such as the confidence thresholds. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, where do all these AI-based clinical applications come from? They come from our Edison. For the AI Open Orchestrator, these are provided directly from GE Healthcare, as well as a network of our third-party partners. And they include applications that are regulatory approved for our scanners and PACS, or that are certified for proper operation with our orchestration platform. And to assist our customers to spend less time finding, evaluating, and purchasing the right software from GE Healthcare and our partners, we've established a software marketplace. Visitors to this marketplace will be able to browse their software, see a list of their current GE devices, and be able to quickly see new items that are available for those devices that they have. They'll see what software is compatible with the products. They can review the pricing, and the information is tailored to them based on what they have. And they can also manage direct download of software trials, installations, and updates. And in the future, we may include AI and developer components from startups to accelerate clinical innovation and research outcomes as well. So all this adds up to what we call the Open PACS AI experience, as it allows our Centricity PACS to incorporate and utilize AI results coming from a wide variety of sources. It can come directly from a scanner or an edge device connected to a scanner. It can be acquired from GE Healthcare or a wide variety of third-party AI vendors. It's orchestrated by a flexible and scalable workflow engine that's part of the PACS, and it's floated to your radiologist's existing reading workflows through a uniform and seamless experience, both in the Centricity Workflow Manager and the Universal Viewer. The bottom line, this platform approach, enabled by a flexible and open orchestration engine, can facilitate seamless integration of AI-based clinical applications without requiring you or your IT teams to change your workflows. And it allows easily onboarding of existing and new applications from multiple vendors, providing a rapid and robust scalability. It provides a uniform interface and user experience across multiple AI-based applications. And most importantly, it doesn't add any additional clicks to your radiologist. So there's no denying it. Healthcare is changing at a very rapid pace. And in radiology, it's not enough simply to read faster, nor is it realistic. Therefore, in today's environment is one in which AI is no longer an idea or the future, it's a requirement today. Your organizations may soon be able to choose from thousands of algorithms that could potentially detect concerning features and images from multiple modalities in seconds. And while this evolution may change your radiologist's traditional role, it also means they can spend less time performing manual tasks and more time interacting with critical members of the care team and their patients. The introduction of AI brings with it a sharp realization that life as we know it is forever changed, and the future belongs to those willing to transform. And we here at GE Healthcare hope you choose us as a partner in your transformation. So that concludes my presentation and our speakers' presentations for today. I want to thank you for spending some time with us, and I look forward to answering any of your questions with our other two speakers after one last poll. So Karen, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Really great talk you put together there. Very thought-provoking. Lots to think about and how you can utilize these applications. With that said, our final poll for the day here before we get into the Q&A, and we have lots of questions that have come in from all of you in the audience. Please take a moment to participate. Do you use artificial intelligence applications in your reading workflow now? And if so, how many different vendors do you utilize? So if you would give that some thought, make a selection, not applicable to my organization, not using any, only 1, 2 to 4, or 5 or more. That would be really helpful to hear back from you there. And I think we will now share the results. And we can see here that currently most of you are not using AI, and we'll hear from the presenters what their thoughts are on that as we get into the Q&A. I have unmuted all of your lines, gentlemen, and with that said, we can get started here, and we have lots of questions that have already come in. I'm going to start with this first one. Somebody writes, this is a very interesting presentation. Has anyone thought about the patient who is a concerned and frightened human being? Rushing through without proper communication is not appropriate. We cannot, as healthcare professionals, neglect the human interaction. Very good point that's made there. I don't know if Rahul or Peter or Sanjay wants to take that first, but let's hear what you have to say.
So this is Peter.
Peter, after you, yes.
Sure. I just want to, yes. So I think, you know, what we see is that patients are concerned when they have a possible indication, right? A negative indication. And if you can shorten that time from the point of some diagnostic to a decision, it can greatly put them at ease, right? And you think about how, what ICAD is doing with their Profound AI. I mean, they could potentially detect a cancerous indication or not. And even before that patient has left the clinic, the AI could assist the care team in deciding do they need to, say, do an ultrasound or even a biopsy. And so then you eliminate that time where the patient is notified by phone and having to come back in clinic. And I'm sorry, Raul, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. I'll build on your answer there, Peter. So we here at GE Healthcare place tremendous importance in patient experience. Not only artificial intelligence, but also when we design our hardware, we always have that patient experience in mind. Speaking of mammography, you might know the self-compression that GE Healthcare is known for, or in other products in bone and metabolic health, DEXA, or in X-ray. We are always thinking of how to improve the workflow for the patient, as well as the technologists. And some of the examples you might recall I gave about AI of alerting at point of care. If the technologist is able to do an examination faster and with confidence, that experience just becomes much more pleasant for the patient. In addition to the hardware examples I mentioned, certainly patient experience is the top of our priority. To you.
Thank you for adding that, Rahul. I think this one is directed at Dr. Parekh. Will I benefit from an AI imaging platform if I only have one or two algorithms installed? Dr. Parekh, could you address that?
Sure. Thank you for the question today. So the first thing to consider is at face value, you could argue that you don't need a platform if you only have one AI algorithm or maybe two AI algorithms. But as all three of us have alluded to in our talks, AI is ramping up. AI is going to become more common and more prevalent in radiology. And the number of applications is inevitably going to increase. So it's going to become unsustainable to have multiple AI servers or nodes, and also the cost of installing each of these. What a platform does is it's a fact of consolidating this together, and in the long run, it will prove beneficial. But again, right now, at face value, if you only have one AI algorithm, sure, a platform may not offer you direct benefit, but it's more, as I mentioned in my talk, I believe it's the platforms that will enable radiology AI to scale. So if you want to truly adopt AI, the platform approach would be the way to go.
Thank you for that, Dr. Parekh. I don't know if anybody else cares to comment. If not, we've got plenty of other questions here. All right, Pete, how about this one? This one might be for you. How do I select which AI vendor to partner with?
Right. So there's geographic locality. Is that vendor in your region? Does they have good presence? Are they certified via regulatory body in your region for use? Here, of course, in the U.S., that's the FDA. What is their, do they have good reader studies? Do they have a good body of evidence? What we do when we work with vendors is we first put them through a first pass at looking at all of that, and then we prioritize those vendors for working with. And then we also have a certification lab in our offices in Chicago where we put them through the rounds. We don't actually recreate their evidence, but we ensure it's scientifically valid. We run them through minimal tests for business viability, and also that they've properly utilized our open API and certified that the integration has been done. So we, certainly, I think we want to leave that up to the customers themselves, but we're trying to assist at least during these initial times of organizations onboarding AI.
Thanks for that, Peter. Another question here from the audience, one worthy of discussion, is how do we ensure that the implementation of AI is device or vendor independent? A statement is being made here that the industry should make AI algorithms vendor agnostic so that they can work in any equipment from any vendor, much as the DICOM standards exploded, networking in PACS and radiology earlier on. Can we expect this? Is there a similar standard for AI implementation in your thoughts? Maybe I'll direct this one first at Rahul, and then we'll see if anybody else on the panel wants to comment.
Certainly. If you look back at any innovation that has happened, and certainly DICOM standards are a great example, being open strategy is certainly beneficial for ushering innovation as well. And this is the premise of our Edison platform, wherein that philosophy drives creating an open platform. So Edison is really, the vision of Edison is to partner and include other apps in the future and create a seamless platform that other hospital systems could leverage and scale up to. So I'll just say that. And Pete, since you're from the digital team, you could add more insights to what I said.
I think you appropriately covered it. Kieran, we got a good list of questions here. Let's just try to see if we can get through a few more. Thank you, Raul.
Okay. Pete, this one might be for you. Is AI orchestration only for radiologists, or can it be used to AI-enable workflows for the clinicians and also the referring clinicians? I know you referred to that software in part of your talk.
Yeah, sure. So I have to tread a fine line here between what we're certified for use for and what the platform's capable of and what we're working towards in the future. So our vision is that it will not only work with our PACS, but our VNA as well as other types of archives and systems. And certainly the open nature and the standards evolve will make that a lot easier, right? But once you start connecting to the VNA, vendor neutral archive, then you also have clinician workflows that can take advantage of the AI processing in different forms. So it doesn't need to be just the radiologist. And there's conceivably, I mean, that last slide where I talk about transforming, I think as we evolve in the future, you know, we will see transformations in the workflow. Maybe some disposition of the patient can be made before there's an actual report, right? So there could be situations where it could facilitate decompression of our healthcare systems because the patient could be admitted sooner or discharged sooner. Especially if you can make a determination that things aren't as critical or not. And as we start to deploy AI more widely, get more comfortable with it, it gets, the regular restrictions, might be approved for different types of use cases. I think we're going to see more of those AI clinical workflows. And Sanjay, I don't know if you have any comments there.
Yeah, just to add quickly, I think from a market perspective, what I mentioned in my presentation as well is AI vendors now need to differentiate, and as the market evolves, demand will change, and it won't just be radiology itself that needs these AI applications to work. It needs to be the whole clinical workflow to provide benefit outside of radiology, and that will be the true benefit of AI. And that ties into the scaling of AI again. Thanks.
Thanks for adding that there, Dr. Parekh. A question here about how hospitals are responding to deploying AI at the point of care. Maybe Rahul, you could address that?
Sure. This is a very interesting question. Remember the exponential curve that Peter was speaking about, right? So we are at that point where a lot of hospitals have started adopting artificial intelligence. In fact, this reminds me of a hospital in India that we are working with. I'll discuss a case of a patient in ICU who had bilateral pleural infusion. A chest X-ray was performed, and our critical care suite flagged that's suspicious for a pneumothorax. In this case, the radiologist perhaps thought that was a false positive, but the next day a CT scan was performed, and it was confirmed that bilateral pneumothorax was being formed. On day 2, one more chest X-ray was performed, and in this case as well, our AI flagged as positive. So in this case, the radiologist actually confirmed a visible right apical PTX pneumothorax forming on the chest X-ray. So this for us was an excellent example of how radiologists are adopting artificial intelligence. And in this case, that patient was kept in the ICU and perhaps helped in saving life of the patient. So a very, very powerful story for us on adoption of AI by a hospital. Over to you, Kieran.
Thank you, Rahul, for that. Another question here as we think about workflow and other folks within the organization, within a healthcare environment, you've got the surgeons also as participating. And the question is, where is the surgeon in the workflow planning? Do you plan on bridging the radiology surgery gap? Peter, maybe I'll address that one to you.
Well, we're a little outside of my area of expertise. That's an interesting question from just from the viewpoint of some of the perception of what the surgeon's doing. We went in with our UX team to actually look at these surgical use cases in using imaging and found that it's the RA that's looking at the images, right? So, I mean, that opens it up a little bit. So there are technologist workflows, I think, that the AI is going to, and I mean, look, we all sort of talk the same speak, right? We want to elevate the radiologist to operate a higher level of licensure. So I think the answer to that question probably lays in, what things can be intelligently automated that, that's more grunt work or prep work for that surgeon. So for instance, can you provide him more information quickly to allow him to make a planning decision more quickly? And as you start to bring in things that we haven't touched on today, like advanced visualization algorithms, the things that used to be called CAD, right, computer-aided design decision, you know, like spine labeling and automatic segmentation of tumors and nodules and BI-RAD scoring, that type of thing. I think you add those in. We don't necessarily think of those as AI, but certainly GE has many of these that have been that are based on deep learning that are AI. Again, that I didn't talk to today, and I think those things might be the first things to flow into those workflows. Sanjay, I don't know if you have any comment.
I think just to add to that, it's exactly what you said. It's how these additional algorithms evolve. And what we're seeing from a market perspective is radiology is one of the first areas in the hospital to adopt AI much more actively than other areas. But slowly it will pervade into these other areas. And setting up these imaging workflows, as Pete mentioned, will be key to getting AI into other areas such as surgery.
Thanks for that, Rahul. Pete, we've sort of hit the top of the hour here. There's obviously quite a few questions still in the list. Are there any that jump out at you that we should address, or maybe we can try to address them at a later time individually?
Yeah, I think in respect of everyone's time, why don't we let the audience go, and the speakers, let's convene and see if we can answer some of these questions for the individuals post-webinar.
Well, we will do that then. So, you know, certainly I'd like to thank our panel here today who did a great job of sharing their thoughts on how to implement artificial intelligence in imaging workflows, a platform approach, and we had a lot of great questions from the audience. So on behalf of all of us here at Applied Radiology, we thank you for joining us today. I'd also like to again thank GE Healthcare for making today's event possible. So with that said, let me thank you all again and mention, you know, certainly during these unprecedented times, on behalf of all of us here and GE, you know, until we meet again, please stay safe and healthy.